Hello again, this is John Burroughs, and I'm going to continue with my autobiography, 7 Years to Life. This is chapter 71, and it's called Break Down, Go Ahead, and Give It to Me. You have probably noticed that I have a penchant for using song lyrics either as titles of stories or strategically placed within the body of the story. This is probably due to all the years I spent with Lee, who is a superb guitarist, and we'll have a section in this book devoted to him at a later point, writing original songs together. I feel strongly that this title fits this story perfectly. In the previous story, Employee Enablement, you heard the name Jim F., who was Christina's mentor before leaving for another position. I cannot recall if he went to a different department or left the company altogether. During the time he was with Public Communications, he would call me into his office to have what I would call little chats. He would try to help me in my quest to be a manager, and some of his advice was quite helpful. He was a soft-spoken guy with a personality that just oozed trust, and his demeanor was, or at least seemed to be, entirely genuine. I found out later that this whole image was a well-practiced front for his true self. I never at any time during our little chats did I suspected that I was being sized up. I vividly remember talking with him in his office one day when he mentioned a program that he highly recommended and was a member himself. He told me how it had completely changed his life and reversed the direction he was headed in. It had made him a better man, husband, leader, and human being in general. He especially belabored a particular point. He learned how to be courageous in the face of his most dreaded fears and actually overcome them. He started doing things that before this program he would have dismissed, trying in an instant. He told me the name of the program was LifeSpring. If you have read this book of stories up until this point, you know that I, still relatively young and optimistic, knew when I was getting pitched, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. I have pitched many products and services that were of great benefit of both business and individuals alike. When I knew I was selling something beneficial, I was at my best. The few times I sold products or services that were shady or bordering on a con, I was at my worst. When I realized that was what I was doing, I quit in a heartbeat. I trusted Jim, and he told me of a seminar about LifeSpring taking place in San Jose and that he could reserve some seats for me. I jumped at the chance. It was approximately 3 hours long, and I believe we were served dinner. There was an MC and many speakers who described the wonderful and dramatic changes LifeSpring had made in their lives. It was a well-organized event that was highly professional, and all the people there had given presentations that were inspiring and motivated at least 3/4 of the room to sign up for the program. The program was expensive, and I signed up even though it was going to be a financial strain. There were payment plans, however the term was short. The program I signed up for was scheduled to begin in 30 days. It was going to be held in the church at San Jose, be held in the church at San Jose. The religious affiliation of the church I cannot recall at this time, but for some reason I believe it was a Protestant church. I remember the day that I showed up to begin my training, and I was taken aback by the sheer size of the church and some of the other buildings on the complex. I had been living in San Jose for a short time, and on my commute I would pass the complex every day and never noticed it. Perhaps that is because it was located high on a hill, and never glanced up towards it when I driven by so often in the past. The program was scheduled to start at 6 p.m. in the auditorium that once again I was surprised at the seating capacity of 600 people. I considered that large for a church, especially when it was a separate building from the church itself. Many people were lingering outside waiting for the 6 o'clock starting time. I have an obsessive compulsion about being early for anything that I've committed to attend. I entered the auditorium and found a seat. The time was about 5:50 p.m. About 5 minutes later, the seats began to fill. At 6 o'clock p.m., exactly a handsome middle-aged black man, dressed in a suit that I envied, strode to the podium and began to speak. He basically began giving us an outline of what was going to take place that evening. His outline also served as a welcome speech. I was pleasantly surprised when he told us there would be a number of breaks during the evening, each break being 10 minutes long. He emphatically expressed that being back in the building on or before any break was due to expire was a crucial component to each individual's success, not to mention it was courteous and indicated your commitment to the program that you had paid a substantial sum for. This was music to my ears. I disrespected people that were habitually late. Tardiness for tardiness' sake is an outright insult to those who are waiting to begin something only to be delayed by a few inconsiderate people. The gentleman was approximately 5 minutes into his speech when two female stragglers came strolling down the aisle and found places to sit. Much to my surprise, the speaker stopped his speech in mid-sentence, descended from the stage, walked down the aisle, and asked the two tardy ladies to step out in the aisle. Then in front of 400 people or so, he began to verbally berate those two ladies for their tardiness in a way that was appalling and uncalled for. It was incredibly similar to a drill sergeant ridiculing two recruits for making a small mistake. It was not long before the ladies were in tears, embarrassed, and broken down. He told them to leave and that attendance in the program was no longer allowed, and he told them to go to the administrative office for a refund. Though I was fanatic when it came to punctuality, it would never cross my mind to treat people in such a caustic manner, let alone bar someone from a program within the first 5 minutes of its beginning. I wanted to intervene and attempt to beat the living shit out of this egomaniac, but now was not the time. It also raised in me a number of suspicions of the intent of the program, but I was unable to confirm without some additional data. I don't know if this whole spectacle was by design, but I was positive that it served to demonstrate the inequality that every participant would have to endure going forward. I was slowly changing from participant to investigator. The central theme of the evening was focused on the participants in order for them to remember, like every other human being alive, that they had accomplished things to be proud of, but if they were to take a deep look inside, they would find that their transgressions and unkind things that they had done to the people closest to them far outweighed their accomplishment. It caused pain and grief to their loved ones and created, in many cases, an unbearable guilt for the participant, creating a mental block, causing them to ignore what they had done in the hope that time would help heal them. The guilt also caused a stunted growth in areas such as socially, emotionally, psychology, and finally, professionally. By blocking these things out, they would never reach their full potential, and their lives would be riddled with fear and regret, preventing them from experiencing true happiness and contentment. What do you think happened next? Of course, LifeSpring had the solutions. We were going to discover the road to these solutions by breaking into smaller groups. Once we had found a group, the idea was to sit in a circle and meditate, not for the purpose of finding peace, but for the purpose of creating guilt. The participants, of course, were not aware that they were going to end up at the end of that first night feeling so guilty and embarrassed. That was exactly the intention of LifeSpring. We were supposed to close our eyes and remember all the bad things we did to people and the hurt it caused them. This led to many people losing their dignity and desperately seeking a way to relieve their pain, make amends, and eventually regain their dignity and self-confidence. Now I found myself meditating and putting forth every effort to despise myself for every dirty deed I had done to anyone in my life. This book illustrates many of those deeds, but I have made peace with myself with most of them, and I was there to learn how to build up my confidence, not destroy it. I could not make myself feel like I was some sort of devil's disciple. We were told to meditate 15 to 20 minutes, but I opened my eyes before that and was shocked to see that most of the people in my group were sobbing and crying like little children. After 30 minutes, there was an announcement over the PA system instructing everybody to return to his or her original seat. When everyone had settled in amidst the sobs and tears, the same slick MC began questioning his audience in general. The audience, for the most part, felt they had experienced a spiritual epiphany, even though they were guilt-ridden. The MC then asked for volunteers to come up and share their experience. 5 or 6 people immediately walked up and formed a line, waiting to share their mystical experience. The first 2 in line spoke of the horrible things they had done to people, the lying and the cheating. Some of the aforementioned experiences happened 15 to 20 years ago, but nonetheless, it had opened their eyes not only the restitution that needed to be made, but also the fact that they now knew they were capable of making reparations and becoming a new, more kind human being. When they were finished, they were still crying, and it appeared to me they had become more frightened and guilty than they had been in years. The MC interrupted, and in the tone that reminded me of a dramatic preacher, he explained that they had experienced a breakthrough, and that was the most critical component of their success and further partnership with LifeSpring. Scam, and more scam are the words that describe the judgment that I now had of the program after hearing this well-orchestrated bullshit. More people started to head up to the stage. So did I. I wanted to fake a breakthrough so as not to arouse my true feelings about my experience thus far. When it was my turn, I tried to give an Oscar-worthy performance, and in most cases I am quite adept at doing so. But Slick Willie saw right through me. He told the audience that my little speech was a pathetic attempt at trying to fit in, and that I had a long way to go, and LifeSpring would be with me every step of the way. I must admit I was crimson with embarrassment, but that did nothing to alleviate my feelings that I was witnessing some of the best con men in history. It was over for me. This was going to be the last time I attended LifeSpring. The MC then told us we had about another hour left or so it would be a good time for a 10-minute break. He also warned us to be back on time. I was going to leave them, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I would return to see what the final hour had to bring. When I returned from break, it took about 5 minutes to figure out the core strategy to their little scheme, even though it was amazingly subtle. Remember the old story about the lion that had a giant thorn in his paw? A human being or tribesman is walking along in the jungle and discovers this lion in enormous pain, barely walking along. He notices the thorn and extracts it from the lion's paw. The lion appreciates the guy's kindness and becomes forever grateful to this beautiful, kind man who had the courage to perform such a brave act. That, my friend, is LifeSpring, with the exception of one thing. You arrive without any large thorns maiming you and destroying how you feel about yourself. So LifeSpring generously provides the thorns and the guilt to go along with it for you. It is genius. It creates the same effect. Through planned psychology maneuverings, they remove the thorn from your paws, making you feel forever in their debt. I could not wait out the remaining 5 minutes. I got up from my seat in the auditorium while the MC was speaking, exited through some double doors, and found myself in one of the corridors leading to the exit. When I was halfway to the exit, my forward progress was blocked by 2 burly men, also dressed in custom-made Italian suits, that appeared out of nowhere. They were extremely physically intimidating. They asked me why I was leaving when the session was not yet over. I said to them, "It's over for me permanently." I found the way that the sessions are conducted disturbing, and the true intent of the program was to prey upon people who had lost their way in life. That would be a good thing if it was genuine, but the fact of the matter is, and it is my opinion, that LifeSpring's intentions are to figure out which participants are sitting ducks for a well-orchestrated method where they end up guilt-ridden and at the end of their rope, and the LifeSpring emerges as a shining beacon of light and salvation in what they thought was a hopeless and dismal future. The people that fall victim to this coldly calculated process have their bank accounts slowly depleted, and those monies ended up in LifeSpring's coffers. Am I close? These excuses for human beings continue to block my path. One of them said in a voice so phony it was laughable, "Why don't we go down to the basement and talk?" I told him in a very real voice, "Go fuck yourself. I'm leaving now and will be expecting a full refund within a week, and if I don't receive it, I will call every newspaper and TV show with my suspicions about your despicable program. I am sure it will get many takers." After saying this, these goons parted like the Red Sea. I received my refund and decided I had wasted enough energy on my hatred for this organization and moved on. Shortly that, I was at a friend's house, and a good friend of hers that told me that during the Vietnam War was an interrogator of captured enemy soldiers. He told me that the interrogation techniques that he learned was very close to the techniques used by LifeSpring. He said that their genius was in the way they so deftly disguise the psychological tools used to make a person break down. Finally, I am writing the story. My son decided to look them up on Wikipedia. He discovered that they started in 1973. I think I attended in 1984 and 1985. They are no longer in business. However, at one time, they had 35 lawsuits pending against them, and surprising to most people, except very few, 5 or 6 LifeSpring members had killed themselves, and many people close to those unfortunate people claimed that LifeSpring was largely responsible for the suicides.